What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Reformed Reader, the channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the Scriptures. And today we're going to be doing a review of The Silverblood Promise by James Logan. So let's start with, what is this book about? Enter a city of traitors and thieves, monsters and murderers. Lucan Gardova is a card-sharp academy dropout, and thanks to a duel that ended badly, the disgraced heir to an ancient noble house. His days consist of cheap wine, rigged card games, and wondering how he might win back the life that he threw away. When Lucan discovers that his estranged father has been murdered by unknown assailants, he finds fresh purpose. Deprived of his chance to make amends for his mistakes, he vows to unravel the mystery behind his father's death. His search for answers leads him to Sophrona, fabled city of merchant princes, where anything can be bought if one has the coin. Lucan only seeks the truth, but instead he finds danger and secrets in every shadow. For in Sophrona, everything has a price, and the price of truth is the deadliest of all. Alright guys, so if you know the format of my reviews, I like to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's talk about the good. First and foremost, the plot is great. It is nothing really new. It's definitely tropey, but it's still fresh enough that it keeps you reading. The characters are great. There's a lot of good dialogue here between our main character, Lucan, and the primary side character, Flea. There's a lot of good dialogue there, really quippy stuff, a lot of snarky responses and things like that. That's the kind of dialogue that I like, because it's realistic in a sense. It's how my friends and I speak to each other. And so I thought the dialogue was really good. I think the characters are great, and the plot reels you in. Now, this definitely is book one. You definitely leave with more questions than you have answered by the end of it, but the plot is still excellent. The prose is easy. I would say this is as easy, if not easier, than Sanderson book. So it is not a difficult read at all. The pacing is extremely fast. With the pacing being as fast as it is, you can kind of fly through these chapters, and the chapters aren't extremely short. I think on average, it took me about maybe 20 minutes per chapter to read, depending on the length. But on average, the chapters are fairly long, but you move through them pretty quick because there's not a lot of fluff in his writing. Characters are good. The plot is great. The prose is simple, and the pacing is extremely fast. Let's talk about the bad. What are some things that I didn't like about it? This definitely feels like a debut novel. Now, what I mean by that is there were some stylistic choices with the dialogue. There were some stylistic choices with, some of the characters were pretty, there were times where Lucan really had some depth to his character. And then there were other times where his thought process or his inner monologuing or whatever seemed very shallow. It felt more like I was reading excerpts of like a short story, because there were some times when his thought process or that inner dialogue that he has didn't really line up with this character. So there were just like little inconsistencies there that pulled me out of it a little bit and made me kind of go, okay, this is a debut novel, and it's not me saying that I can do any better, but it just had some rough edges at times. I thought that Lucan seemed to be, he seemed to be a Mary Sue for the most part. He wasn't bad at anything. And not only that, the character motivations weren't what I would want them to be. He seemed to jump on board with every kind of little side quest without hesitation. And so this is a heist book. It's very much a heist book. And there's like little heists throughout the book that he has to achieve in order to get to the big one. And it's just kind of like, it almost felt like playing Skyrim, that you had this main plot in the background, but he kept having to do all these side quests with all these characters. It's like, well, I will do this if you do this for me, which is fine. But it just definitely, instead of him contemplating these things, or instead of him really stopping to think about the consequences of these or how it's detracting from his primary objective, like I said, it just seemed a little rough around the edges. It seemed like they were like, okay, let's throw this at him, and let's throw this at him, let's throw this at him. And I think the author probably could have gotten to the same conclusion, just went maybe a different route that would have seemed a little more fluid rather than the first quarter he's got to do this, and the second quarter of the book he's got to do this, and with each thing he's bringing on new members of the crew and things like that. So like I said, it's the bad is really just that this was a debut novel, and so because of that there are those rough edges. But I'm not saying that to detract from it. I still thought it was a really good read. All right, now let's talk about the ugly. And what I mean by that is, what are some of the sins that are expressed or maybe steeped into the work that might cause a Christian to refrain from being entertained by this? There's a few things. One is the language. There's quite a bit of language in here. I wouldn't say that it is rated R, but it's definitely PG-13. There's just more language than needs to be in here. I think maybe sometimes authors get caught up in, I'm writing an adult fantasy book, so I have to be edgy by including these things. And clearly we know that's not the case, because some of the largest fantasy series of all time have zero profanity in it. So I thought it was a little over the top and almost crowd servicey in that sense. And that's just not my preference at all. I just thought it was this unnecessary profanity. So that's one. Another is that the city Sophrona that they're in is a city of depravity. There's a lot of debauchery that goes on. It's almost as if it's divulged to your modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. Maybe not quite to that extent, but that's what you're led to believe, right? You're led to believe that this city that he's in is full of villainy and things like that, to where there's not really a good person to be found. The moral upright are almost non-existent. There's a couple of characters that are those examples of righteous, but they're few and far between. And the reason I say that is because there's things in here that I wouldn't put in there that I think, again, the author could have still expressed this maybe in a different way without throwing it in your face. I think sometimes authors think that the readers are dumber than they are, and they can't figure out what they mean. And so, there was a couple same-sex individuals there, some people that had same-sex preference in there, but it wasn't presented in a glorified way. And at no point was any sin being glorified. As a matter of fact, it was saying this city is depraved, it is corrupt, and here is evidence of why. And so that it wasn't anything that was like upfront, but there were, I think, two passing instances where they had mentioned a couple of relationships, just like, it was less than a line. Again, that's not to excuse that, but it also wasn't promoting it. It was the intention of the author to express the state of the setting, if that makes sense. So if that's something that you're zero tolerance, I don't even want it mentioned in my books, then that might hold you back. Really, other than the language and a couple of situations where there is that utter depravity expressed in this city, I didn't really find anything. It comes down to the main question, which is, should a Christian read this, or would I recommend it to a Christian? And the answer is really, it depends. Depends on a few things. It depends on the individual, as far as like, what do I know you as a reader? What do you prefer? What are some things that you like to steer away from? Do you want zero profanity in your books? Do you want zero mentioning of any kind of debauchery? Then this isn't the book for you. Also, do I think that you could probably find something to better be entertained by? Probably, but it's not a bad book. I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much that I got the broken binding edition with the sprayed edges because of how pretty the cover is. So I did think it was a very good book. I just thought, it had a couple little problems here and there because of it being a book one and a debut book. But other than that, I thought it was good. So should a Christian read it? It just depends. I think it's going to take a very specific reader, somebody that is really steeped into the fantasy genre, that's looking for that next heist book. It has a similar feel to Mistborn. It's a little more snarky. It's kind of like if you were to take Harry Dresden and drop him into Mistborn, which to some people sounds great, and to some people they're like, no, I'm good. I'm not a fan of either of those. So if you're not a fan of the Dresden Files or of Mistborn, I would say this probably isn't for you. But if you are, I would say, maybe check it out and pick it up. And it's not expensive. It's also not a super thick book. I think it's like 400 and something pages, maybe pushing 500 pages. And the font is pretty large for the most part. So I think I finished this book in less than a week. So again, should a Christian read it? It just depends. It would depend on your age. Would I recommend it? Yes, to the right person. So Silverblood Promise, I thought it was a really good read. I will pick up book 2 when it comes out later on this year and read it and hopefully drop a review for it when it comes out. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good book, and it was a really good debut novel. So if you're interested, I would say definitely pick it up and check it out. So if there's nothing else, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you guys on the next one.